Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome to the March Wins wrap up. Here we have Lucia and Kathy with us, and we're just going to do a quick introduction and then continue with chatting about the residency and also just like our practice in general. So,
Mhm.
for fun, I'm Grace. For fun, we're also going to do signs and if you want MBTIs, because we were talking to Lena last time and she was talking about her signs. So, we thought that would be interesting to do. Um, I'm Grace. I'm one of the co founders of Close at Home. And yeah, we're just facilitating this wrap up conversation.
Yeah. I guess I'm Sam. I'm like the second like co-founder of Close to Home. We're like kind of the ones facilitating the whole residency and putting everything together. You guys know that, but we're just saying it for the Zoom call. Um, and yeah, I guess we're both just like practicing artists and designers, and we wanted to um, kind of have this residency for like other like creatives to kind of like join in and like participate in like a larger project, especially like in this kind of age of COVID, at least for us right now. Yeah, and I'm based in Miami, Florida, USA, and my sun sign is Virgo, Scorpio moon, rising Sag. Yeah. You didn't say yours, Grace.
Oh, I didn't. I'm also a Virgo sun, and then
So much Virgo energy.
yeah, a lot
Too
of Virgo
much. Too
energy.
much.
And then I'm a Capricorn moon and a Aquarius rising. But my MBTI, if like other people are more comfortable with that, is I'm an INFJ.
Oh, same.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone is. I swear everyone is. I'm
Sam is
also one.
also.
I believe everyone, like, I've known too many people who are an INFJ.
Yeah,
But
I'm just
An
surprised it's a
INFP.
theme, Maestro.
uh,
I think everyone in the art scene is an NF. Like they're either E and F or I and F, and then like the next. Yeah.
cool. So yeah, if you guys like wanna like maybe just share a little bit about yourself so you guys can like know each other. I know we already like met with you guys individually, but yeah.
Do you want to go first, Kathy?
Sure. I'm Kathy Guo. I am a Chinese American um, interdisciplinary artist, and my work is really focused about interpersonal dynamics and just questioning all the little bits and bobs of humanity and why we are so attached to each other, and thinking about community and the self and all that good stuff. And I am currently in Massachusetts right now, and I am a I have identity crisis with my astrological sign because I'm technically a Gemini, but I am on the day of when Taurus switches to Gemini, so I feel like I'm very Taurus as well. Um, but my moon is Scorpio, and I am a Virgo rising. Yeah, and yeah, INFP.
My name's Lucia Nguyen. I pronounce it Lucia, but
Oh my
I'm
God.
open to everyone pronouncing it differently.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the American pronunciation is Lucia, but I think
Yeah.
also
I'm
like
so sorry.
no, that's all good. I'm so open to it because I was raised like I feel like in all my schools my teachers would pronounce it differently. And I at first would protest and then eventually I'd sort of give up and then all my friends around me would
Oh
be
my
like,
God. I'm so glad we didn't have like any audio that said like your
yeah.
name because
Yeah. No, that's all good. Yeah, so I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I'm on the land of the Gadigal peoples and the Cabrogal peoples. So I'm on Darug land. And I work as a writer and I work in an art gallery. And so Grace and Sam modeled my piece off the words that I wrote. Um, I'm Vietnamese Australian. My parents and the rest of my family were war refugees after the Vietnam War, so they migrated over here. A lot of my work navigates language, but also ghosts and superstitions and rituals, especially based in exploring Southeast Asian cultures, living as diaspora. And I'm a Cancer Sun, Leo Moon, Capricorn Rising. And I think I'm leaning more into my Leo Sun the older I get.
Oh,
My Leo Moon, sorry. Yeah.
interesting.
Nice. I feel that too. No, okay, well, we didn't really share our backgrounds like that. Should we go? Or should
If
we
you
move?
want, yeah, we can.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else is like curious. We never really talked about it. Well, I'm Haitian, Filipina American, second generation. So I family like the Caribbean and also Southeast Asia. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Korean American. Yeah, and we're just going to get like started with some of the questions. Am I still here? Do you want to start, Sam, if you're on it?
Yes, I can. Well, we were just like kind of curious to first start off in kind of asking each of you like I guess what kind of drew you into applying for the residency and what I guess about it interested you in this idea of collaboration and what you ultimately like kind of wanted to gain from a project like this.
I guess
Whoever
I was
wants.
the first
Yeah.
introduction to this residency was that I know you guys personally, so I was really interested in it. And it's been a really long time since I've really been able to make work. So, because most of my work is typically in this sculpture studio, but also I know a little few things about digital 3D modeling. So I was interested in expanding my work in that front. And I was also open to like modeling half of it, but since you guys had some dandelion models already, so I decided to just like leave you to it. But yeah, at that point, I was also exploring learning how to use Blender. So I was rethinking about making art in the digital sense. And it's just like really perfect to explore your concept while also not having to be in a physical shop space. What was the question again?
I feel like you answered it. Just kind of like what kind of drew you into this project, and what were you hoping to gain from it, if anything, I guess.
Yeah, I was interested in the community aspect of it too, of just like broadening my network of artists that I worked with, and I just really wanted to make art again. So yeah.
No, we're glad that we could help with that. Yeah, and like Lucia, we know like you
Lucia!
worked like with, oh my god, amazing. I gotta go.
No, don't worry about it.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess like because we know like you like predominantly work as like a writer and like we thought your writing was like really beautiful and yeah, I guess just kind of like you also work I guess like in art like spaces and you like work for a gallery and stuff, so yeah, I guess it's like cool to have like someone from a different perspective also. So yeah, like why do you feel like you were interested in this residency?
Yeah, so I actually applied for it quite last minute because I'm a writer and so I have really no sort of 3D modeling skills. And so I only considered it last minute when you sort of preface that you don't need any 3D modeling skills. And I think recently as well, like given that I live in Australia and that the pandemic has sort of quieted down quite a lot, like I went to a pub last night and it was quite relaxed. Yeah, I think sort of over the course of this past year, I've been thinking a lot about sovereign borders, because Australia is a country that's extremely paranoid about its borders. And then when the pandemic came, we became so paranoid about state borders and crossing them and just policing them pretty much. And I think it's just because of how we've been situated geographically, but also culturally as like a British colony in the Pacific that's surrounded by Asian countries. And so we always have this strange discrepancy between being geographically situated in an Asian dominant space, but having like a historical lineage to the motherland of Britain and just that kind of a home of white history and Western history. So yeah, so I was thinking a lot about sovereign borders and thinking a lot more about how language is a vehicle to cross that threshold, especially because a lot of my writing navigates distance. And I guess because I write about ghosts and superstitions and dreams as well, there's the main threshold that I look at is between the living and the dead, and also reality and waking life and dreaming. So it linked a lot into how I sort of have been understanding the world over this past year. And I also had to translate some Vietnamese for work. And as someone who kind of distanced herself from the language and just the culture in general as I was getting older, just as a matter of assimilation and feeling more comfortable growing up in sort of a white dominant space, especially when I was in an elementary school. And at that age, I was like only one of two Asian kids in a class. And so I became very aware of the space around me. And that's also indicative in how Vietnamese works as a language, because we use honorifics. And I feel like when it's similar in Korean, well. And I think it makes you conscious from a very young age of the space that you take up in a room, say, because you have to address everyone as you're from a position of authority to you or like respect. And so that made me very aware of it from a young age. And then also being aware of, I suppose, being a minority as a child growing up. So and so when I had to translate Vietnamese for work, I sort of had to confront that estrangement, that sort of forced estrangement that I put upon myself as a child. And then I would also find it strange that like you have to mediate that guilt so early on, or that shame as a child. So yeah, and so I wanted to, and this is sort of part of that redemption arc, I guess, in my life. I was just like, yeah, I want to sort of make work around what I've been thinking. And I feel like a lot of the writing and the work that I make is just a means of me to understand my life better, or what my headspace is like at this age in my life. So yeah, and it was great to collaborate. And it turned out to be on a global scale. So it was really fun to see.
Yeah, we didn't expect that to happen, but it happened that way.
Yeah, I guess thank you for sharing that. I think thinking about like borders like recently, and kind of how cautious like everyone's been with that, and especially now even thinking about the US and kind of what's happening on the borders right now, like I guess it is really sad to see. And I think like it's like a project like this is like interesting that it kind of also extends borders, and like through the internet and like through, I guess, this online space, like we could connect in a different way. Yeah, so yeah, do you have anything you want to say, Grace?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think in general, like it's interesting that you're talking about that, the idea of borders, but also like I think when we're thinking about this project and like just like Closes at Home in general, we're like looking back and wondering if it was like if it became possible because of COVID, kind of, because like I think COVID kind of increased like digital art visibility, and also this like kind of like everyone's like redirection to like work digitally and also like connect digitally. So that was also like one of, I guess, of one of the benefits, if there are any, of the pandemic, and something we're excited about because Sam and I actually were talking about how it's interesting how ever since like the pandemic happened and after we graduated, we felt like we connected with more people like outside of our like immediate bubbles. Um, after this happened than before when we were in school, and also like before the pandemic happened, because we're very much within our own bubbles, like especially within the US too.
Yeah. And I think what you were bringing up about this idea of kind of removing yourself like culturally or like existing in like Western spaces, and kind of like removing yourself, and like you wrote like about that really like beautifully also. And that kind of like inspired like another question we had, like
But I guess like in general, like we can, if we're talking about it, we kind of related that idea of like forced adaptation and like forced estrangement that you were talking about, that kind of like became part of your redemption arc, to this idea of our idea of transformation. And I think you kind of talked about it. So something we were like curious about too was like not necessarily like limited to this project that we had with the residency, but like how do you view like this idea of transformation like today, especially with everything that's going on, and then also like I guess within like your like understanding of yourself and like your cultural lineage, and like this idea of like cultural adaptation.
mm,
I think in terms of transformation, like I guess recently as well, a lot of the work that I've done, I'm working at the moment with a Chinese photographer in Sydney, and she's been taking pictures of different Asian women of different ages in spaces where they feel desirable or beautiful. And I remember she asked me, when we're taking photos, if I thought of myself as beautiful. And I kind of like just completely blanked out at that question, because it's never a term that I use internally, but it's always like externally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of had to sit home on the train and think about it. But I realized that I consider beauty, and I guess like transformative beauty as well, because I think when I consider something beautiful, it's always sort of transcended some kind of threshold in my mind to reach that sort of level. And I feel like I always consider beauty for myself in terms of confidence and self-determination or power. And I feel like a lot of the way that I consider the dynamics of the world is through power. And that might have just been the way that I have grown up as a Vietnamese Australian. But I think in terms of, I guess, like POC identities and children, essentially, because we all grew up being very aware of our identity sort of prior to our white peers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like the idea of having to adapt for the sake of survival, and I think also because that's sort of foregrounded by our parents' stories of survival. I feel like because that's how they, it's sort of a lens for them to teach us how to value living in the spaces that we live in and sort of having access to the resources that we have. So I think sometimes also I have this kind of I have like hesitation over talking about being marginalized when I also come from a very privileged background and I have access to so many resources. So yeah, so I think the idea of transformation is something that I'll probably have to contemplate all my life. And so this is sort of part of that whole kind of archive, I assume, that I'll eventually look back on and understand of how I've grown up and sort of navigated the world. And because of this period of the pandemic, when there's sort of just been this deluge of information, and the way that I've also kind of conceptualized the world has sort of significantly transformed, just like even within a day from the news that I consume. I think it's sort of just part of my way of living at the moment. And because, especially because of the situation in Australia where it's quite relaxed, it's definitely been a way for me to connect more with my friends overseas. Like I've called friends in the US and also friends over in the UK and things like that. So, and I feel like our friendships have strengthened, weirdly enough, more so in this pandemic era. Yeah, because I might call a friend in the US like fortnightly, even if we haven't talked for say 5 years beforehand, because we just want to catch up, because this is sort of the means of connecting now. And then when we don't call every fortnight, it feels really strange. In contrast to sort of 5 years of radio silence. So yeah, so I think just I think your project is so important because transformation is, and connection through the means of transformation is just so central to this period in history.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely relate to like the connecting more. Like it's just so much more normalized to connect virtually now. So it doesn't feel strange. Even though like for example, I haven't seen Sam like in person in like
No.
over a year, but we've been calling so often for classes at home too. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, for my project, I would connect a lot with what you said about survival, and how my piece is thinking a lot about like diaspora and how like most my family members are in China right now, and like my family is the only one that came to the US. And so just feel like even though like my parents never really assimilated to America to the point that they actually went back, that but I still feel like I have no real ties to my culture, in the sense that like while I do know how to speak and I know like borderline things, like very basic things about my culture, lately I've been thinking a lot about how self-care is really different in Asia, and like thinking about self-care in the US is kind of like a new concept, or like in the West it's like this radical concept that you need to take care of yourself, but in Asia and Asian countries it's like so embedded in the culture, like health is always talked about, and like your body is like the most important thing, to the point that the only way that I know my parents love me is that they care so much about my health and well-being. Like they always ask, like even just like asking like have you eaten today, it's like that's how you know they love you, because they care about your health, instead of being like, oh, how was your day, like I love you. Like that's not the way, their love language. And so like during this time I'm thinking of transformation as like recalibrating, recalibrating the way that we think we need to be in terms of like capitalism, and also like caring for yourself. So yeah, I'm drawing inspiration from how my family members and the elders in my family probably take care of themselves and love themselves, like with exercise and like qigong, and all the food knowledge they eat of like, is this a cold food or a hot food, and how that balances your body. And I just feel sad that I missed out on that knowledge that I'm supposed to have based off of family lineage.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I think as you mentioned self-care, and I guess this is to everyone and what you think about it. Because I think in terms of the way that like Asian diaspora and also Asian cultures articulate mental health, I've been thinking about that a lot recently, because that's also a massive kind of area of contemplation. Because I suppose after the Atlanta shootings, I was reading reports that were Sydney based on brothel workers and massage workers, and they found that when they would interview them, because they were predominantly Chinese workers, and yeah, so English was a second language to them, and they were all migrant workers, that the way of articulating mental health was different between Mandarin and English, and so maybe it wasn't an accurate judgment of mental health. But I get, yeah, I guess, and also you mentioned like in terms of expressing care, it's not always through the prescribed words of like, how was your day, or I love you, and things like that. So what do you reckon of I suppose that divide between being really embedded in a culture of self-care, and then also knowing how to articulate or discuss mental health, because Asian mental health has been such a prevalent thing during this time?
Yeah, I think it's such a contrast between the West is so much about mental self-care and less about your body self-care, like, and then Asia is so much more about body self-care and very, very sparsely about mental self-care. And yeah, I've been thinking, I don't really have like an answer about that, but I've been thinking about it a lot. Yeah. Do you guys have any, Grace and Sam, wanna say something?
No, I like agree with you 100%. And I also think like and especially in Korea, I think there's like a lot of like mental health issues that like are just like obviously like you guys are mentioning, but it's just like it's obvious like to us from like a Western perspective, it seems like oh that seems really clear that it seems to be like this. Like for example, like lookism or like beauty standards and like stuff like that, which is like very severe in Korea. Or like even like dieting culture too. So it's like interesting how there's like that physical care, self-care with like I guess like herbal medicines and like acupuncture and like that's like recently becoming more popularized in the West, but then like other things are I don't know, like I don't know if like many especially like people from my parents' generation acknowledge that. Maybe like in the younger generation, I know like meditation is like becoming big in Korea and stuff too. So it's interesting to see that like difference in health and also like self-care.
Yeah, I think for me, like existing like with living in America or Western society and having family from like a different part of the world, like and existing in this in between, like I also recognize how much like both really need to go hand in hand. Because I would agree, like even with my family, I'm like closer to my Caribbean family too, and like it's the same concept of like, did you eat today? Or like we don't really apologize, we like give you food, like, and that's like our apology, like kind of with our parents. Um, but at the same time, like I'm recognizing like how much like this idea of like therapy or like talking about your from a conversation, and that is like so important to your health and has like a physical effect on you as well. For me, like they definitely like go hand in hand, um and I think like also it's really funny to me like kind of this idea of holistic medicine, and like my grandma will like make me all these like teas, and she said it's supposed to cure COVID and stuff. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I'll drink this, like,
Yeah.
you know. um, so it's just like very funny, but at the same time like taking those teas and still good for you and something to like just continuously like drink, and like becomes like a ritualist practice more.
Yeah. Also,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, Lucia, you mentioned like your work and interest in like superstitions too, which is really interesting because I feel like a lot of like the health, like the interest in health, especially in Asian cultures, is like also like really much embedded in like superstitions too. I don't know, like especially like my mom won't let me sleep with the fan on
Hmm.
because she thinks like I can suffocate and die and like it's just stuff like that. So and like my mother is like considered like she considers herself like a very like Christian person, but at the same time she's like the most superstitious person like I've ever met. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just like curious, like what are your like both of your thoughts with like kind of not just like superstitions and like this idea of health, but also like thinking of superstitions, but also like what you know, like that science, like that you know in the background, because like that's something I also have to talk to with my parents and stuff.
Yeah. I was reading something recently. I've sort of just been reading texts that sort of orbit the language of Vietnam and how that's transformed, especially because it comes from such a dense colonial history. But I was reading a text on the Mandarinate system that existed from the Chinese Empire before French colonialism. And the author was talking about how, because a lot of meaning is inferred in Vietnamese, so we might use the word love without understanding what it might entail. And we also indulge in rituals and practice them without particularly knowing what they might entail. And it's just sort of like upon us to infer the meaning from it for ourselves, because we might never discuss it openly. And so I probably feel like that's the same way in terms of superstitions, because my mum, she's also a Virgo, and she'll often she'll often assert that she'll often assert that she's really logical, and she's Catholic, and she'll say that she's not superstitious, but then she'll say all these things about like bad energy or things that I should do, especially over the summer. I kept having really hectic dreams. And she was like, don't worry, I'll get you like wind chimes. And my friend who's Filipino, she was like, do you want a sage stick so you can sage your room? And so all these Asian women around me were giving me different talismans to like protect myself and telling me different stories about how I could sort of protect myself against like demonic energies or whatever that were like surrounding me.
Yeah.
But I think it's just really central to, I sort of take it, regardless of whether I believe it or not, as really central kind of relics to the cultural storytelling. And
Yeah.
I think I just enjoy them because they also are, I guess, tools to navigate more abstract ideas of love and grief and loss and things like that. So I really value them, regardless of how absurd they are, because I think they just indulge my curiosity in life. And I like this idea of maybe things existing beyond the realm of what I can see, and sort of things that I choose to believe in, because I'm still really confused about faith. I was raised in a Catholic household and my parents are Catholic, but I'm still confused about what I believe in or whether I want it as a framework to kind of find value in living, basically. But I find superstitions enjoyable, and just stories about rituals enjoyable because they show this care for living and being alive, and the value in being curious about the world and not entirely cynical about it. Because I think being apathetic and cynical are just the worst things to like just sort of so antithetical to living well. So that's my take on it.
Definitely. I like found myself lately becoming more superstitious. I don't know, like as I grow older, like I'm like, especially with like even like things that are very like Korean, like it's like kind of common to go to like a shaman to like know if when some big decision is like supposed to happen and stuff, to like figure out your life decisions. And like I feel like I was very skeptical when I was younger, but now I've been like more receptive to it as well.
My dad's superstitions are really problematic. He'll be like, Kathy, you can't drink hot water. I mean, you can't drink cold water, and white people drink cold water because they have a longer intestine. I was like, what the fuck? Like, that's not it. But he'd have like those kind of reasonings of like, you know, white people are doing this, but you can't because your body's different. And aside from that, wait, were you saying something, Sam?
No, it's just that's interesting.
Aside from that, I really hold superstitions, especially like the Chinese ones, close to my heart because it is really, like Lucia said, so tied to the culture. And like things like drinking hot water is good for you. Like I don't know if that makes any sense, but now it's like it's just so cultural that like it makes me feel close to home. Close isn't home, but and yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about how like I did a lot of presentations and things in high school about how other like Asian medicine is how we should accept it, even though it doesn't follow the scientific method, and thinking a lot about how like indigenous methods of healing are just like, or understanding of ecology are completely discarded by Western thought. And that just makes me angry because even though Western science is more reliable, that doesn't mean that our truth in this world is only that. And I think that a lot of these like cultural things are so old, like they've been used for so long that, you know, they must have some significance and importance and value. And like thinking about how like indigenous people treat their land in a way that is like way beyond any science could ever figure out, and it like works, it's good, it's helpful, and they have like this reciprocal relationship to it. But yeah, it just makes me angry that we have to follow science all the time, or there's a hierarchy that science is more important, because like Western science is kind of like a part of like Western enlightenment and whatnot. So yeah, and especially with this new Chinese New Year being the year of ox, which I am. So I'm definitely feeling that energy of like, it technically is bad luck this year for me. So, and like, even if it like isn't real or not, it makes me feel good in a way, believing in it, because I feel close to my family.
Yeah, I do also feel like we've like normalized like a lot of Western superstitions though, and like practices that we don't even realize are like that, and we're just like immediately meant to associate like even our own families like cultural superstitions as like kind of this like othered thing also, I think, like existing in these Western societies. And I guess like that kind of like brings us to maybe like another question like we kind of had in mind for I think like what it means to be like a person of color, like making work about like cultural specificity. And I think like Grace and I have had these conversations ourselves, and whether you're an artist or like even a writer, like there's this idea that like I guess like POC almost even like exoticize themselves like in the work that they make, or this idea of like cultural specificity. And I don't know, we're kind of like curious to see like what you guys think of that as like a concept, and do you like relate to it or don't, or do you feel it's more detrimental for like that kind of conversation and critique, or
like
not, I guess.
that line also, I guess, like just like when it comes to like especially within art, and especially when we are making art within like our predominantly white institution, it was very much like identity based work was often tied I like a lot of BIPOC students like question a lot of times if they were exoticizing themselves, like within that was like our experience with it. So Kathy has a similar experience, but I don't know if she has a different opinion. We are just curious to see what you guys thought.
Yeah, because I guess there's like the idea that you like combat that same conversation of you like want to remove yourselves from it, or like remove yourselves from the work, or just make whatever it is you want to make, and then coming back to this kind of like self-realization and like appreciation. But can we even remove ourselves from these kind of words?
Did you want to go first, Kathy? Or
Can you go first?
okay, I'll go first.
It's a loaded question. It's a little
yeah. I guess it's coincidental that you asked that, because I've been talking about it just with different creatives around me, especially because a lot of them are people of color. But I feel like, yeah, recently I've just been questioning how much I want to milk the sort of marginalized aspects of my personality, especially when I've been submitting stuff, say, to any kind of diversity call outs, and they've been asking me to some degree justify why I'm marginalized, or in the way in which I could diversify like a potentially predominantly white call out. So yeah, and I've also been thinking recently about how I don't want to center trauma so significantly in the narratives that I write about my culture, because like from so many diasporic creatives, they write about the migration stories of their family, and there's always suffering that's inherent in that, and just intense grief. And that definitely also affects the way that you're raised, because that sort of trauma becomes intergenerational. But whenever I spend time with my family, like my aunts flew back, a lot of them live interstate, so they flew back for my grandma's 80th birthday. And when I was with them, I found that they were so like witty and funny and joyful, and there's a lot of wordplay as well that's involved in Vietnamese jokes. And I just found that they would engage with that so much, and that would really kind of make our conversations and just our interactions so lively and joyful. And I think that's missing a lot in the sort of maybe second generation or third generation writings that come, because you want to privilege the sort of labor that your family has gone into to give you a good life, because I guess you feel like there should be some kind of reciprocation on your side. And I think that also engenders a lot of the high achieving mentality of Asian diaspora, because you feel like because your parents or your grandparents have gone through all of this trauma that you have to succeed to justify that sort of suffering. And the effort that they've put into raising you. But I've really had to grapple with that recently, because I don't want to center suffering and trauma in my stories of the community, because there's so much joy and humor and liveliness that surrounds it. And I think also when you're younger, and maybe if you're feeling kind of if you're trying to estrange yourself from your community, then you might use humor in a damaging way to kind of mock or just like pick up all the taboo things that your culture might do in comparison to Western culture. But yeah, I feel like I don't have an answer to this because I'm still trying to figure it out. But I definitely don't want to exoticize myself. But it's hard if you're trying to justify the value that you bring to a predominantly white narrative, because you feel like you have to really emphasize that you're different to some regard, and that the words that you're bringing or the creative work that you're bringing is of value. And so that exists in a deeply colonial history. And I feel like that's also indicative in the way that Indigenous peoples in Australia have to justify why they qualify for scholarships or for funding and things like that, because they have to justify how they're Indigenous. And that is so complicated in a history that's tried to erase them, because you don't have that archive to look back on and be like, well, my great-grandparents were from this clan and all that. And so it just is so deeply entrenched in systemic racism, and it makes it harder for us. And I feel like it minds us of so much emotional labor, that I feel like a lot of the work that I make is just intense anger and like rage. And it's just, I feel like I write better when I'm angry. So it's just, I'm still trying to figure that out. And in a way that, like Kathy, as you mentioned, that like coming from a culture that really prioritizes self-care and taking care of your body, I don't want rage to consume me either. So I'm trying to figure that out as I'm going on. But yeah, it's definitely a question that I've been trying to grapple with, and I don't think I'll have the answer anytime soon, but it's definitely one that I don't feel I guess burdened by, because I'm definitely not tackling it alone. Like I feel like so many of the people of color that I talk to who are creatives, and also the fact that you guys brought it up, is indicative of the fact that it's like just a diasporic question that we're kind of that just ricochets in our heads all the time.
Yeah, what I liked about this project was it that didn't really ask for us to milk our identities. It was just like make something about transformation, and whatever came out of that was like true to our identity. And I think that, I mean, it's special because you were like, this is only BIPOC residency, which like there needs to be more of that, because in those spaces we're just able to make our own artwork without thinking too much about like, oh, is this representing my community or whatnot, like all that stress that comes with making work for white spaces, which is making artwork in general, is making work for in white spaces. And I think when I first started making art, I was very angsty about my identity, and I made work specifically about it. And overall, over time, I just got bored of it, because it just felt too, like everybody was talking about the same thing, and it wasn't like actually that genuine of a piece, like, and it wasn't very unique either, even though I know there is a lot of space for that. Like we need more of it, but at the same time, it didn't feel the most genuine. So now I feel like I'm just transitioning to making work that explores like whatever concept I'm interested in, but I trust that the narrative that I'm talking about is inherently present through that work, and my culture is through that work, even though I know that most people are not going to see it. But to the people that know it, and people who are in my culture probably will see it, and I think that's all there needs to be. And it's hard to trust that, but it's we have to try our best. And is it okay if I read this paragraph from this article I read called I don't talk about why I don't talk about the body. It says,
Yes, definitely.
finally, from the point of view of a museum or a curator who is operating within this body as evidence of difference rubric, artists of difference who do not make this difference publicly visible in their work are essentially useless because they do not help to create a moment of public visibility of inclusion. This creates a system in which these artists are effectively pressured into framing their practices to be useful towards these curatorial ends, performing their identities through their work in a way that invites and thus endorses this kind of curatorial attention. This is very serious because it means that artists still don't feel welcome to make whatever work is in them to make, no matter how inscrutable their own body might be, for fear of risking being passed over by a museum looking to visibly diversify their program.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about that. I can put it in the link.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think similar to like you, Kathy, I also like when I started making identity-based work, I felt kind of turned off by it because I think within like at least my professors, like I found myself making things that were very like digestible for them or like digestible for like a wider audience, which I think I did like without realizing at the time. So I would make like as like a textile artist, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna make a reference to like the Humboldt, which is like this like very general thing and like kind of like a very referential thing rather than something that's like very specific to me and like not necessarily like the concept or like story I wanted to tell. And I noticed like that kind of transformed as like Lucia, you were saying like you started talking with like more BIP like BIPOC artists, and also like just like having that space of like support and also like conversation, and through that frustration, but also like realizing that support, we kind of created Closest at Home because we recognize that a lot of like objects are like without like when they are with context, they're often like very sterile. So they're like, this object was made in blah blah blah, is located from this, and something we really wanted to bring in, and through this residency and even through like what you guys have done through your writing was like kind of bring this like more personal narrative element to like humanize a lot of these objects or like artworks. And I don't know where I stand right now either with like myself and like this idea of like exoticizing myself necessarily yet. I think that's like something that I can't ever solve, but like something I think we've been trying to do is just like create a space where like that isn't necessarily something that is on your mind when you're like submitting work or like creating work.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm like I guess I'm like also, yeah, we also think about it all the time. But I'm also like I feel a part of me is like it is a word that's also like kind of placed on us in a lot of ways too. Because I feel like in a lot of senses like young artists or young creatives or young writers or anything, like I guess like starting to make work, it's always like not like the best work you've ever made, and there's a level of it being kind of shallow like in some regards, like, and like the same conversations could maybe even be had with like non-POC identifying people or whatever, like, but like those kind of words are not really placed on them in the same way that like a BIPOC identifying person would be like in making a work that is like I guess deemed more like culturally shallow, because it's like we're like young and like navigating what it means to be our own person too, just like anyone else, like, and then but I guess like what am I trying to say, we're like navigating I guess these ideas of like what it means to be like our own person, but I guess like at the same time like navigating like removing ourselves from these stereotypes that have been like placed on us and like put into our faces all the time, and trying to remove ourselves from them at the same time. So it's like any type of artistic battle, but at the same time like dealing with a lot of like what is being projected onto us at the same time. So it's like kind of a different experience too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost kind of shitty that like I feel almost the extent of if I'm making a work that's like very obviously about my identity, I feel guilty about it. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I was also like curious, like Lucia, like from because you work at a gallery that is like very specific for like a specific identity, like it's a space created for that. Like how does that change in that space? Because I've worked in like museum spaces that are very like on a more institutional level, I guess. And like a lot of the Asian artists, like it was interesting to see like how contemporary Asian artists were often like grouped with like the Asian section. So like they're contemporary artists, but they wouldn't be put in the contemporary art section. They would be like put in the arts of China or the arts of like where it's like with like literally arts of artworks are from like 2000 BC or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so like I remember like working at that museum being like, so like why? Like I was like just and like what was crazier is that no one really saw that as a problem besides like clearly like BIPOC yeah.
Name drop.
Edit.
Sorry.
It's fine. But but yeah, like and on top of that, the curator was also a white woman who was not only just in charge of China, but and Korea and Japan and Southeast Asia and Oceania. Like she was in charge of just like a very broad spectrum of like that like of course she would generalize artists. So I was curious like how like do you think that is like different in like within your space? Like I know yeah. That was a bad
I think that definitely taps into the intense rage that I've mentioned. Yeah, because I feel like I suppose the space that I work in is predominantly administered and sort of curated by Asian identities, like Southeast Asian, East Asian, and then South Asian. And so but I feel like that becomes kind of maybe like a base for how we sort of discuss things that are around us that are problematic. So say I feel like I had a dream last night about one of the white women that I used to work with. It's and I realize sometimes I forget about her and she's like a figment of my imagination, but it's definitely that when I was 19. And I definitely have kind of this like deep archive of working with white women and how they just don't often talk about race, so you have to educate them, or you're fearful of speaking up because they're from a position of authority. And it's some kind of neocolonialism where you have to sort of like position yourself in kind of context to the white authority that employs you or like puts you in your place in a place of employment. And so I think it's really useful to work in the place where I do now, because I work with so I work with other Southeast Asian or East Asian or South Asian identities. And so I'm a lot more comfortable to discuss those things. But I think also that definitely speaks to how I was schooled in Australia. So I went to a really white primary school or elementary school. And then when I was in high school, I was predominantly surrounded by Asian identities. So I went to an all-girls it's called a selective school here in Sydney, but it's basically like, I don't know if you have this in the US, but it's like a public high school, so it's government funded, but you have to take a test to get in there. So all the girls there were very like academically driven, probably all played like one or two instruments, were very tame because they were so rule abiding. And And also, I was so nerdy as a high school student. Like I mentioned in my bio that I studied Latin, and I was so defiant about studying it, even though all my friends were like, "Why are you studying a dead language?" And I'd be like, "I do whatever I want." And I was and I was so kind of comfortable in that identity as POC in a community of like other POC girls who are very similar to my, like, in the way they conducted themselves. And I also in high school was sort of considered whitewashed because I wasn't sort of, I don't know, consuming like K-dramas or like K-pop, like Cantonese pop, all of that. And I didn't really watch anime. So I was considered whitewashed in a lot of ways because the media that I consumed was very like kind of Wes Anderson, like John's kind of leaning like to the indie white man, like, and definitely in the manic pixie dream girl vicinity.
She was on Tumblr.
I went to my Tumblr the other day and I was like, no, I don't know if I want to relive this. But definitely in that sort of space of, and especially in the era of like, I graduated high school in 2013, but like I'd say from 2009 to 2014 maybe, that was a really kind of significant era for Tumblr. And the bodies that you would sort of encounter on Tumblr were very like skinny white models, especially if you were engaged in high fashion, or even if like the films that were privileged on Tumblr, like Eternal Sunshine and like what else? Oh, like Skins UK was so popular on Tumblr. So I definitely went back and looked at that archive the other day and I was like, oh, these troubled girls and troubled white girls were so centered in this like kind of hub that definitely a lot of POC engaged in. Because recently, I've been talking to other creatives my age and they all had a Tumblr era. And we were all engaging in the same content of like white manic pixie dream girls who definitely never talked about race because it wasn't part of their duration of the world.
Right.
My Tumblr was all about fandoms. It was like Avatar: The Last Airbender fandom.
Mine was a mix.
I guess you were like in maybe sorry, what did you say, Sam?
I didn't have Tumblr. So, I've seen the blogs you're talking about though.
So maybe we're all in like neighboring suburbs because I definitely kind of brushed across the fandoms, but I think also because they were conducted in this like intense like fandom language that I would be like, I'd have to really educate myself in this fandom to engage in. But I think it's so the space that I kind of conduct myself in now is sort of just like, I assume just like definitely like a climax of the history that I've grown up in and sort of the media that I've engaged with and also the people that I've been physically surrounded by. And I'm definitely comfortable now to talk about race in my place of employment because I definitely have a lived experience that's shared by others around me. But I'm also not hesitant to talk about it in white spaces. I think because I'm so comfortable to talk about it in, or I'm sort of like given a voice in a place where I feel like I contribute valuable work. So when I'm in spaces that are white dominant, I don't particularly mind talking about it. And I think also from just the movements that are happening at the moment, that white people are called to be more accountable for their actions. And they're called to be more, I guess, vigilant. And I think also sometimes I also was thinking recently about just my dating history. And I'm really hesitant to date white men because I feel like if I wanted to talk about race, I might be more considerate of their feelings. And then I was like, but I feel like a lot of sort of POC people that I know are used to sort of from childhood being made intentionally guilty or like conscious of their identity. And I was like, why am I being conscious of white men's feelings now when I was raised in a community where I was meant to, like, intentionally meant to feel shameful of who I was? So I think the rage of just being raised as a Vietnamese Australian has propelled me to just discuss particular things and just not feel so fearful of like white people's guilt.
Anyways,
Anyways,
on that note,
I guess we wanted to say thank you guys also for like being a part of this project, writing like everything that you did, and like sharing your ideas with us and like collaborating. Because considering everything that happened this year, like we really appreciated like connecting with you all and like being able to, I guess, like work on this together. It's been nice to be able to talk to like other like women of color too, and just feel a sense of like, I guess, like connection with each other. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also just like we know that it was also like something that wasn't paid too, and it was kind of it might have been a lot of work too. So thank you for doing everything and responding on time
Yes.
and everything.
Thank you for providing this opportunity to us, and you also weren't paid, so
Yeah.
and you did all of the work, so
Yeah.
we're so grateful for you and for being so organized and being on top of it, and yeah, really commendable.
Yeah, I thought you were super organized, and thanks for
Oh,
including me.
really? We're like,
Yeah.
are we being organized enough? Our Virgos are double
Yeah,
Virgos.
I mean, we were late to our
Yeah.
meeting. We were late to
Yeah, I
our
know. We
meeting with
felt.
you, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was so great to be involved, especially from a distance. Yeah, and I think it's regardless of the being unpaid or not, I think it's a really valuable kind of ethos of like community care. I think that's quite significant, especially in sort of isolation of this particular time in history. So I think it's really necessary to cultivate different forms of care.
Also, I just wanted to say that I'm quite impressed that, because at your place it's 6 a.m., isn't it? Like something around Okay, I appreciate that.
No, it's totally
Yes,
fine.
of course.
It was a little hard in the morning, but we're all
Whatever
good.
it takes. Whatever it takes. Yeah.
But it's also Saturday, so it's not too bad,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not like we have work or anything.
Yeah, usually I have this policy that I don't see people before 2 p.m. Like that's just a policy for me. Like I have meetings after 2 p.m. So I have the morning for myself. So yeah, that's super impressive. Like anyway.
We make an exception for closest at home stuff.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just like do quick introductions, and
Mhm.
we also just wanted to know everyone's sign because we were curious. I don't know if you're into astrology like that, but Lina told us she was a Virgo, and she also shared the rest of her chart, and we were like, oh, we were kind of curious about everyone else's. So I'm Grace. I'm like one of the halves of Closest at Home, and I am a Virgo sun and a Capricorn moon and a Aquarius rising. And I guess if you want to do MBTIs, if you aren't familiar with astrology, I'm an INFJ.
Yeah. I'm Sam. I'm the other co-founder of Closest at Home. We, I guess, like wanted to do this because I think we realized like the opportunity to connect with people, especially in this weird COVID era, and we all had the opportunity to meet online and reach each other from so many different parts of the world. So we were really excited about that. And I guess for me, I am a Virgo sun, Scorpio moon, rising Sag. And I'm also an INFJ. Yeah.
Should I continue?
Yeah.
I'm Vanessa. I'm a 3D artist from Berlin, and I have no idea what like I'm a Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn, but otherwise I have no idea. So I
That's
can
totally fine.
Cool.
And I'm Alfred. I'm Manila-based artist and educator, and I'm a Libra sun. I'm a Capricorn rising and a Pisces.
Okay.
Nice.
Lucia is a Cancer and Kathy's a Gemini. And I mentioned before, but Lena's a Virgo. If you wanted to know. It's like, oh no, Vanessa.
Oh shoot. Um.
Should we
I
make
feel like
for-
Virgos always come in pairs.
Really?
Like a lot of the people that I know are like a lot of Virgo friends that I know like come in pairs, but are also like scary efficient. especially
Okay.
especially
I'm
together. It's
sorry.
like
Very
It's
good.
no problem.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Apparently, when I touch my earpods, then it just hangs up. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it ends the call,
Yes.
yeah.
Sorry.
Happens. I do that sometimes too.
Yeah, I just wanted to like reposition them, and then yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So we can talk for until 7. Oh, I don't know, for an hour, I guess. Or if you want, we can go as long as we want. We're kind of open. But we're just gonna keep it as scheduled for now. And we just wanted to express like how thankful we are for, like Sam said before, like for like your guys' patience, but also just like contributing and also like responding so quickly, and also just um like really being really I guess, what's the word, um I don't know, like my words are escaping me this morning, but just like really compliant, I guess, with everything that we're doing, and like getting your words in time and everything. That was really great, and it was just really great to connect, because during the pandemic, at least for us, we felt like we probably like couldn't connect with that many people, but it was really cool to be able to connect with so many people like on a more global scale, which wasn't like necessarily what we were expecting, but it was also interesting to see like different perspectives from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys like have any questions at any point that you want to ask, or the other collaborators, let us know. Lucia had a question that she wanted to ask, so maybe we have to remember to ask it.
Yeah. So I guess our first question is just like more of a general one, and it doesn't have to be about like your project and as a whole, and we kind of talked about it individually, but we also wanted to just like establish it in this panel. But we were like interested to hear from everyone like why they were interested in applying for this, or like submitting to this residency, and like what you were seeking from it as well. That would be really great. Either, I don't know if it's too fast to ask that, but just like whoever wants to go can go.
I really have to think about that, because I remember that I saw it somewhere, like the open call, and usually I get really tired with applying for open calls, because I don't know, sometimes I feel like it's kind of senseless to just like, okay, am I fitting there? Am I fitting there? Blah, blah, blah. And when I saw your open call, I felt like, I don't know, for some reason, I felt like I'm naturally fitting in there, because it was also very open. And I didn't know Close Isn't Home before, but when I saw it, I thought like, yeah, of course, you know, that totally makes sense, and it's super necessary. And it's I remember that I took a university class a few years ago, I think maybe 2 years ago, and we were also talking about it was about nature and Anthropocene and things like that, and we were also talking about 3D assets, and which trees, for example, are represented, and where are they coming from, and how are they used in certain games or advertisements and so on. And of course, that's like that's just a small part of the politics of 3D, and in a world where 3D is becoming more and more a vital part of our everyday, and also how we perceive the environment. I felt like 3D can be an opportunity, but it can also just reproduce the world that we know. And it would be really bad to just miss that opportunity to shape it differently. And so when I saw it, also your library, the assets that you create and everything, I mean, I can also imagine to maybe contribute another 3D asset or something like that, you know, because I think we all, like, if you work with 3D, we all have like assets and things lying around on the hard drives that are not used anymore or anything, but still have a meaning or something. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. That'd be great.
I think I have to agree a lot with Vanessa when you said. Also, nice meeting you.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
great.
I also want to say
great.
that. Nice meeting.
It's great. It's great to see you and like all of us
Yeah.
like gathered together. And I feel
Totally.
like, yeah, I think I would agree with like gravitating towards close isn't home, because I want to align myself with digital art that is self-critical and tries to build something, not just to move forward, but also to move forward with other people that you have an affinity with. Because I feel like, I don't know, I'm starting to get like annoyed with like the feed of like, oh, like this is another like new, like, oh, these people are like, oh, I'm smelling things now via digital, like great. Like for me it was like, it was almost like this contest, that as much as the conversations are, oh, but we're depicting these things and those things, but like I think what close isn't home does with like this, uh with the, as a digital resource and also like an educational platform and like a collaborative initiative, it kind of brings the conversation somewhere a little bit more fundamental, instead of just like making new things that are like flashy, but like they are also that, but it kind of comes from somewhere and it's rooted in something that matters very much to us BIPOC creatives. So yeah.
Aw.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah, that means
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think when we started, we were just like, I think we were also at an institution and we were like, I guess frustrated with the, I think, elitism that can come with it and the exclusivity that comes with that a lot of ways, or art and design field in general. And definitely like that conversation of accessibility like comes with collaboration in our eyes. So really like glad to hear that that comes across.
Yeah. Do you, so I guess like kind of related to this project also, we were curious because we like kind of had this theme of transformation, and like you guys all interpreted it in like your own ways. So we were curious to see what you thought about this idea of transformation when it comes to like your own perspective, or like as you as a person, but also you like in relation to your work as a whole, because I think that word transformation has a new meaning now, especially in like kind of the time we are now with like COVID and also just like with everything that's happening. We're curious to know exactly, essentially, like what transformation means to you as Vanessa and Alfred, and also like in relation to your work as well as a digital artist, or even as an educator or stuff like that. It's a loaded question, so you can take your time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has different layers, right? Like one layer to me is that 3D, like making art in 3D or digital art in general is already transformational, of course, but art is also already transformation. And I think how I see it in my work is that I always take something from the physical world and try to transform it into a digital world. But it's not a translation, it's a transformation to me. because I feel like I can be much more free, because I can create my own, and of course also in the physical world I can create things, but it's much harder and it's much more, I think the stakes are higher, because in the digital world I need a computer and maybe I need an internet connection to share it or something, but I can work much more free, and I can imagine like whole worlds or whole planets or whatever, or just something that is not related one-on-one, like something that would never be possible in the physical world. And I also feel like I think the other layer that just came to my mind is also like power and power relations, because I'm not sure, I find it really hard to really get into it, like how much power digital art has right now, either be it in social media, on the art market, or in the general society. I think that's always really hard to get, like how important is digital art in the general society, for example. And of course it's shaping all the things that we see. But I feel like it's really important for us to shape it too, because like marginalized communities or marginalized people don't have that much power in the physical world. So I just see like this opportunity to transform also this in the digital world. Yeah.
No, yeah.
It's
No, I would agree with that.
interesting that you speak of like power, because Lucia also yesterday was speaking how she saw the world in like power dynamics too, sort of. So, which like I think is like more evident when you're someone who is a marginalized person too, more so than like someone who like clearly like we all have like our different privileges too, but yeah, I think that is like more evident, and you can see that more visibly as well.
Yeah, I think for me, transformation coincides with the way I usually look at my work, because of time. Because time is something that I'm very much interested in, and uh, most of the media that I use is like live streaming, and I think a lot of moving image artwork concerns itself with time and definitely transformation. When you don't when you step into an artwork or create something, you never come out like the same person. There's always something that changes because of this process, and I was drawn to that theme because we we are undergoing like a lot of changes at the moment, and we are in a critical time in history, which to me also um, happens simultaneously with like how like digital art is very much prevalent, or with how we are reconciling with our conflicting histories, and those things I think are something that I want to uh, work more with in my art. So yeah, and also like March winds and the change. I kind of just missed the because I when I was in a different country, I know the seasons better. Oh, it's like, oh, it's fall, but like I'm more used to like to just to everything just being like constant, I guess, because here it's just like either it's raining or it's really hot. So
Yeah.
like monsoon season, and
Yeah.
I mean I guess it's one of the only things constant here because everything else is whack. So yeah, so transformation is something that is desirable but also sometimes um, chaotic. So I think it kind of reflects um, what I wanted to keep doing mostly with my work and with others.
I think that's really interesting what you say about like the seasons changing, and that this is also like a because I very much live by it in a way. I mean, I always consider the weather, and I always consider the season in how I feel or what I do and what I'm planning to do or something like that. Like now it's spring, and I get this kind of spring drive, you know, like coming out of the winter and everything. But it's like I was thinking about it, like because you also just said it right now, like how do you deal maybe differently when there are no seasons like that, you know? Maybe like the transformation is probably in a different way. There's monsoon season and non-monsoon, you know, but I think that's just like an outside factor that is really interesting, like for your mind. How
Yeah, I think the way I deal with it is just I create artificial conditions to somehow move myself like across like something that is constant, because I think
Yeah.
I think I keep on, that's why I keep involving myself in different projects, because that's my marker for like moving forward. Because
Mhm.
I think here either people get very bored or very agitated, because the way because the way that the government restrictions on like the quarantine like changes every day, and then there's all the news and everything, so it's just like it kind of feels grounding in a way to like work from one project to another, to feel like, oh, but now it's a different project. So
Mhm.
it
so
I think
time has to be, yeah.
that's my season, I think.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
that's interesting. Because I feel like I'm also like Vanessa. Like, I get more like seasonal depression when like,
mhm.
because like the sun is like very much down for like it comes up early and it goes down like so early too. So I think in this winter I'm definitely more like a different person than like even in the spring, and then it changes again in the summer too. And I think we like the way we approach it is very much like in a more like within our own perspective of things, which I don't think we realize until later. Because also like Lucia, for example, is from Australia, so like her seasons are switched from ours. So like she's like going into
Hot Christmas.
yeah. They have a hot Christmas. Yeah, exactly. And she was like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we're coming from summer too. So I think we are a little like
That's
this
interesting.
experience in general just also just like try to reminded us like how American we can be, and also like centered in our own like bubbles we can also be too. Yeah.
Yeah, just critiquing ourselves.
Yeah, but I also remembered, because when I lived in Norway, I really tried to go to the Arctic so that I could experience like, if I want change, let's go to like the extreme change. And
That is so
it's
extreme change.
crazy, because I think, I mean, in the 12 like in because I stayed there for quite a while, but like they had like 8 months of no sun, and then like two
Yeah.
months of all sun, like no
Yeah.
sunset, and then two kind of normal months. So I was like, and then I understand now why people are like, oh, it's the sun, we have to go out. But here it's like, can you just like shut down the sunlight? Because I cannot take a nap. It's 39 degrees, and it's, yeah, so it's like burning cement. I think it also depends on where you are situated, because I think in other parts of the Philippines it's a little more like the
Mhm.
paradise feeling, but in the city it's just like, let's wait for the nighttime and then like
Mhm.
work until like 3 a.m. or something, which is
Mm.
what people are doing recently, I think.
I think that would be much better for me, totally, because I'm a total night person, and I always feel like in the morning, like right now, I think the sun comes up at like 7 or something, maybe earlier even, and I have a east-facing room, so the sun comes into my room, and at around 11 or something, it disappears like to the south. And then I feel like I have to be much more of a morning person to enjoy the sun, you know, like in my room.
Mm.
But it's kind of against my feeling of like when can I work the best, or So I know, like, especially I lived in Jerusalem for 8 months, and there was also like 40 degrees Celsius. I'm just saying Celsius, 40 degrees Celsius
Yes, yeah.
during
It's
during the
intense.
day,
Wow.
super intense, and then like after the sun goes down, then like the kind of like the life comes up. So I really like that. Yeah, I like that feeling of like the world coming, like coming from a nap or something, from the heat into the night, and then yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Or like away from uh like official structures. Because I think when it ends like office hours until 5, post office
Yeah.
closes at this time, or like
Mhm.
stop work. So it's like it kind of always reminds me of like gonna rush and like, oh, this is gonna close or this is gonna take time. But at night it feels like, yes, people are sometimes going inside their homes, but like it's like free time. Not really, but like you can go out or you can sleep, or because
Mhm.
it's dark, so it's like more like an open time for people.
Yeah. But we were, yeah, definitely curious in hearing everyone's perspective, because like we were interested in that idea of like seasonal change and like how that affects your like perspective. But then also it is like a mindset at the same time, and like the seasons affect that mindset or not, but it's ultimately like up to you like what like you mean by transformation and all that. So um yeah, that's like really exciting to hear, I guess, like your perspectives of it. um and I'm also like with you, like I'm in Florida and it's like always just hot. Maybe well, I know Fahrenheit, so I'm just gonna not say that. But yeah, like it's mostly hot all the time, but even the season, like spring is subtle, so I notice it, but I'm used to the subtlety of it, and it's like a different, I guess, like experience too. Yeah. I guess like we can move into another question that we had. Like, Vanessa, you brought up like this idea of like power dynamics, like both in like creative fields and not. And like I think that's something we always like think about as close as at home. And I guess like I'm gonna try and be as coherent as possible. um I guess like we like think a lot about, I guess like even I guess like thinking about, I guess, US history, like ways in which I guess like BIPOC identifying people have been removed from like either like STEM or tech or just like digital art or any of these conversations, even coding and stuff, and like either removed for the conversation or diminished in their fields in a lot of ways. And I also think like to some degree, like I also think about how we make work about like either some of us like make work about our identities or trying to remove ourselves from these like, I guess, like Western narratives and such, like, but at the same time I'm like, we also receive like Western education or like associate ourselves with a lot of these like institutions in a lot of ways. And there's this idea and like this concept kind of floating around that like what does it mean to be like, I guess, like BIPOC identifying and then like using Western tools to like create your work. And like I guess what is like your perspectives on that, or do you think that's even a good like question or thing to bring up? Is it like constructive, I guess? That's loaded. I don't know, we're asking loaded questions. um
Yeah.
we're just curious, like even if it's shallow thoughts, we're just like we're just, yeah.
But I think it's good. Like instead of talking about, I mean, it's also good to have like small talk. But like I think these things are like something that, well, like people would hesitate to ask, I guess. But it's good that we. I think, yeah. To me, what matters a lot are these like conversations also that we're having. That's why I'm happy and was very open to the when you were just asking like, are you open to like having a conversation about it? Because I think even if we're BIPOC identifying, it's not like we are endless resources of truth, but we are also moving along with, not moving along as in like going with it, but like we're also not trying to navigate it. And I think it is important to be heard in the way that we are doing it, because it sorry, I don't know if something is burning somewhere.
Oh no.
But like we're beside like the fire station, but I don't know if
Okay.
it's like some crime or something. But like ACAB, but like it was like, I think, yeah, I think it matters for people to hear from us that sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's enjoyable, a lot of times it's confusing, that there are many feelings that we are dealing with, and not just like one thing is like, because I think the difficulty I think for us is to like just get to the point, or like speak in 5 minutes, or like, why would you make me do that when my
Yeah.
experience is complex, and it kind of makes you feel like you have to fit yourself in that opportunity because like that's the only chance. But then if the way that we are collaborating together and banding as creatives, we get to share that and not have the same restraints that are um, being given to us. And I think to also talk about like the like dealing with it, yeah, I think we sometimes even if we're using like those like Western tools or like globe, like even some like I just realized it when I was reading, because I felt like I got preyed on by K-pop very recently, and then I remembered that like, oh yeah, like Korea has like Samsung and like the cars. So to me, like solidarities are imperfect, and it like what matters a lot to me is like how people connect in not always in like big groups or like institutions, but like these, when people are actually willing to listen, or like when the interactions are on the same page. So sometimes I say more like global north now, because I don't know, like even like Southeast Asia, like I was just like watching
Yeah.
this webinar about like uh, groups that are fighting to advocate for indigenous groups here in the Philippines, and then they're like, oh, there's mining, and then they're taking away ancestral land and all of those, and then listed in the PowerPoint, it's like most of these mining companies are from Malaysia and Indonesia. And I was like, I thought we were friends. So now it was like, yeah, I think sometimes it makes you feel more conflicted, but it also kinds of puts into perspective how much more we are dealing with, and how much more we need to say, and how much our voices really matter in digital art, or in just in like casual conversation. So which I don't think other people with different experiences um, get to deal with on a daily basis, because this is just like it's just one webinar. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that really shows like how important these things also are, like how important it is to connect and to talk about it. Because I also think that I just had two thoughts. Like one was that I think it's also a question of how you consider yourself, like talking about these things from a European perspective. I think a lot about like recent migration, of course also colonial times, like totally, but also recent migration, and that I feel like creative, like younger creative generation that I am part of is very much like second generation migration background, like our parents migrated, and so I don't have like a direct migration experience in I have it in my biography through generations, but not directly like experienced it myself. And I know, like, to me, the question of what can I use, what can I represent, what can I say something about is very, very present. Like, I think about that constantly. And I kind of made my peace with being confident in saying something about my experience, my condition. And also like the influences that I got in a way from either side, from either society, whatever, you know. I'm not talking about like that culture and that culture, because I think it's not binary and it's much more complex. But you know, I remember like questions in the beginnings of my art education that I did like a graphic design. I remember I did like a what is it in English? I don't know. Like in German, it's Dramaturgie. In the theater, it's kind of like something like creative production, like creative production assistant, dramaturgie. Yeah, a creative production assistant maybe in the theater, and the theater was called like it considered itself like a post-migrant theater in the sense of like migration being part of the society. Of course, I mean that's obvious, but like saying it out loud. And I remember that I did like a graphic design proposal in my like in my graphic design class back then, my graphic design studies, for a similar concept, like how would the identity, the design look for a project like that, like a post-migrant theater in Berlin, for example. And I just did like graphic design, and the critique that I got was like, why didn't you use any like African symbols? And I was like, how is this connected to anything that I just presented, you know? Because first of all, it's not just like African or anything, it's like post-migrant, and that's really different. I don't really see the connection between these. And then at the same time, of course I could use them, but if I use them, then I always have to take into consideration how people are perceiving it. And then I feel like I don't want to give it to them, you know? I don't want to use the symbols and then give it to them. And on the other side, it shouldn't really matter, because why not, you know? But it's not free. It's not a free choice to use certain things that you're personally connected to, or other people are personally connected to, because it's always this consideration between how will people perceive it, what will they think, in which box does it fit. And of course a really big question is, does it fucking matter, you know? Why am I losing so much energy by thinking about these things?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that definitely, like, we also like yesterday talked a lot about like the idea of like also BIPOC being like fit into these categories like you're saying, and like, or even feeling the need to kind of like, I guess like exotify yourself like in a lot of these like creative fields too, as a way of like standing out in a lot of ways too, or something, or that's like what a lot of institutions want, or like want us to fit into as well.
Yeah, and I think also like what one of the challenges for us is how we can continuously be difficult for like established institutions, because like the more that we assert that like but this is my vision of it, like for example like in your proposal, I think like if you just gave it to them, like it becomes easy, and the conversation of like decolonization becomes one way. It's just like you giving way. That's why I think I like what you said with like I don't want to to give that to you, because this yeah. So and I also read something about like that like it's not just when we decolonize, it is for BIPOC identifying people, but like Western like ideologies also have to like have their version of that, which is like the imperialization. Although it's like I think it's like a Taiwanese text that I was reading, but then Taiwanese researcher. So that it has to, they also have to exert an effort. It's not just us like untangling who we are and like decolonizing, but it has to be like a two-way thing. So it's difficult for us to like, we want to make it easy for like, for those who are decolonizing, but we also want it to be difficult for those who are like, who are perpetuating these practices. But I'm just like one person. So it's like, it kind of takes like multiple people to do these like, to do these different things. And I think if you put it into just like a practice of one person, then you really see like these tensions of like, oh, but this grant is from this person, so I have to like, but if I don't do this grant, then I won't get to say what I want. So it's like it's very tenuous.
And I also
I think it's super. Sorry.
Oh no, you go first. It's fine.
I think it's super nice that you said we should stay difficult for them. I think that's super empowering because in my experience, like growing up as a Black woman in Germany or a Black child in Germany, I always did everything possible to not be difficult, you know, because I felt like I'm already like just in existence difficult to them, you know, either being it to categorize me or like being too loud, being too like falling out of the picture, you know, and always being like special. And I think that's also behavior. Like I always had problems with like authoritarian people, and then I have to speak up, and then I have this conflict with someone, and it's also in university, it's until today, and I'm starting to not give a fuck anymore. But I think that's super empowering that you say like let's stay difficult, because I think we should take pride in being difficult, because it's also a matter of perspective. Like to me, it's not difficult at all. It's really interesting and it's really important and it's really powerful. It's just like the other perspective onto me. That's why people perceive me or us or whatever and like to be difficult or yeah.
Yeah, and like some umbrella terms, like when do they say? I don't think it just happened with like this with the post-migrant theater that you're talking about, but when people name like some sort of like phenomena, and then it kind of they're very ready to name it, but like aren't ready to face the fact that like, well, this person is post-migrant and you're literally like reshaping this person. So what does that mean when people name us into something like that? And I remember one critique for me as well when I was studying that, like, because I think I did an exhibition with like one video, but it's in a phone, it's in a laptop, and it's in a site specific place, but it's just like one video. And then they said like, it's doing so much, just choose one. So and then I was like, I started thinking, and then it's like, I'm gonna double down on not doing it. So I think ever since I became a little happier with like the output of just doing more, because I think I don't know, it's easier to sell, I think, if it's just like one thing, even like branding or finding your own style, which is a problem of a lot of my students. It's like, where can I find my style? And like, I'm just this short of saying like, when you find your style, they're gonna exploit you. So it's because people know what to get from you. Like, no one wants to invest in a wild card. They always want like, oh, this artist does this, so I know this. But like, of course, it has its like dangers also of like, I don't know, like being a little too complex probably. But like, just like follow the wind, I guess.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because like I also, like, I think I also face that problem when people are like, there's too much. There's like too much. And like, I think me and a lot of like BIPOC students, like especially like, I'm pretty sure this is like international and like most people feel this way. Like, I think they overexert themselves with like trying to educate their peers, like trying to explain themselves, or like sometimes over contextualize, like being like, oh, this is what I'm referencing because it's something that's unfamiliar to like a lot of their white peers. So like I felt like when I was a student, I felt like I had to like be that person who like explains everything so I can get like the same credit that like my white peers would get. But I never had someone to be like, no, like just double down and like be difficult and like just like be able to do that. I think I like kind of came to my own like understanding and like my own like acceptance with it when like I started talking to like more peers that are like BIPOC, like, and like kind of like not basing my like own validation based on like the institution and like like turning more to these circles of like support and community and care. And that's like kind of what we're thinking about when we're creating closes at home. I don't know if we're like at that point yet, but yeah, that's like definitely on my mind. And that was something that we wanted to ask about, like this idea of like contextualization as a means of like accessibility, and also like how it's often like painted as over contextualization, or even sometimes like it's interesting that a lot of BIPOC students, like art students or even like creatives, have to contextualize their work so much sometimes.
Yeah, I think like this, like Lucia described it as like this like interior rage, or like a subtle like frustration and rage that you have like with it. And like that's like kind of like what even sparked us to do Closer to Home. We were just like sitting there together and we were like so frustrated, like, and then you just like, fuck it, like we're gonna just do this the way we want to do it, because we were like really tired, like. And I guess that's what sparks a lot of the work that we do too, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we actually had like 2 white advisors for this project when it was a school project. And they were like, how come you just like, why don't you just make everything white? And we're like, what? And we just like ignored it.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't really discount the help of like I think friends who are like mostly like in the global north, because there are also those that you can learn from as well. And I think the ally, I enjoyed some allyship, not all. I don't know why it kind of crumbles when people like like gather more. But I think on one-on-one things, it was like, this is, I find this helpful. And then when it becomes like a group think thing, it kind of like, I thought what you said this. So it's like, maybe there's also something about like social behavior that's different. But then, yeah, like I think it's a little annoying, but also like freeing to like think that it's up to us to sort through what we find helpful and what is not in all these things, because they will never know exactly what we need unless we talk and unless we give it to ourselves and each other. So it's it's very messy. Just how it should be, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess at this point, we were like, last time we went a lot over, so we were like, okay, let's try and be, at this point we can ask like where you guys are, what you feel, like if you had like any questions you wanted to ask, like in general, or I don't know, like we just kind of want to open it, like if you guys had anything you wanted to say or ask or anything.
I think I still have like a few thoughts, but they're not really, of course they're connected, but I'm just going to throw them out. Like one thought that I also had was, because we, like in the beginning, we were also talking about like Western or global North tools that we are working with. And I think that's I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, like how to see it, especially like looking at it from like looking at digital art, and how much like, yeah, I think it's just really difficult to for me to wrap my head around, like, is it what, like is it a Western tool or not, and how much, of course, does it have to do with access to to tools like a computer. Like I just bought a new computer,
Yeah.
and it's expensive, and I had like a MacBook before, super expensive too, of course, but I bought a Windows laptop right now, and it's much better. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Because earport problem again. Technical problem. And then I feel like, okay, how can you even like open Cinema 4D or open Blender? How can you render something which is extremely consuming if you don't have like? And then of course I am looking at it from like a privileged Western perspective. I have the money, and there's so much, in there, because I don't want to look at it and say like, oh, people need a computer, but maybe people have a computer. Like, who are we even talking about when we are saying like with the Western tools, and then the other side, like what is the other side of something? That's, I think, a big question in my head. Like, how am I even talking? How can I even talk about it or something like that?
Yeah, I think like when I was saying, I like quoted it because I think that's like, at least from what I've experienced, like what the frame of mind is that I need to like perceive a lot of these technologies as, or whatever like articles, whatever like readings, it's like based on, I guess, Western frame of mind, I guess, or that's like what is kind of deemed like the standard, or that's what I guess meant by that, because like especially now, like that's definitely not the case, and I've just seen a lot of like programmers like, I'm gonna like use this code and I'm gonna translate it into my native language, and like so it's like a different kind of conversation now. But yeah, I think when, I guess like for us, like we were in school, so like my perspective is like coming out of university too, like there was a certain like ideology of how I'm supposed to use these technologies and what I'm supposed to do with them, and that didn't align, I think, with what we and like I imagined for myself and my work, and we were like, it's very limiting and it's such an inaccessible technology in a lot of ways to I don't know, I guess the question is like to who, but yeah, I guess like we come from like Western society, so but I think even when I was in school, like I thought about at my university, like the work that I was doing, like I was like kind of frustrated with at a point, because I was like, I don't even know if like my own family understands the work that I'm making or what I'm doing. And then it's like, so who, like, where is the disconnect and why is there disconnect? And then I think about, this is because of where I received my education and all of that, and maybe it's not as relatable as I thought. I guess that's what I was like thinking about. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe it could also boil down to like a little bit of like self-evident. I find it sometimes I find it also still hypocritical about like, oh, let's just not quote stuff, or like let's not just like refer to some other like text, or not like to decolonize is to like really go back to the roots, but the roots are also are very tenuous. So the yeah the difficulty, I think, comes from us uh, having everything on the table, and then like trying to move pieces around and see what we are able to do. So I think we are among the many things that I think we are gaining now at this point in time. Like we should also give ourselves the the space to make mistakes about it, because and also the concessions that we make so that we can survive are also things that we should be able to give ourselves, because we can't as much as we always want to be uh, we want to stay true to like what we want to advocate for. Sometimes like you still end up like, oh, but I'm still like, yeah, like what Vanessa said about like, oh, I'm still using a laptop. So I mean, we still want to do what we do, but I mean, like, what if being decolonized means like going back to the forest, which is like, which we can't see happening anyway. Like, what is sustainability? Like, those things are like, I think it kind of also connects with like what I researched with Closes and Home about like the Nautilus and like what does putting things in a museum mean? So I think it becomes our job to like reassess what people should find important and what people can find important now and in the future. So we are allowed these like questions and difficulties. Like for example, like sustainability. So actually, when I did an exchange semester in Berlin, like one of my classmates was like people used to think that like walking with feet, like walking barefoot is like savage, but then now people are like, oh, we recommend these shoes that are shaped like your feet. And then it was like, aren't you like, doesn't it just like sometimes it makes you it makes you laugh and cry at the same time, and like, oh, now you like what you didn't like before, you just wanted to be the one to say it. So it was it makes your head hurt to like see how to really like have a say in how the world is able to work. But I think yeah, yeah, even the technology thing, like digital art, I'm kind of looking also at like how people access it, and people that we don't think have access to it still find ways to try to understand it. So it also affords them by continuing the work that we do, it also affords them the space to try to understand it instead of not having like any material for it at all. Because I remember one app here in the Philippines, it's called like Mobile Legends, and I don't know if it's like a Chinese or Japanese like a gaming company. And I keep seeing like blue collar workers like jeepney drivers or like security guards like playing it all the time. And then I was like, what the hell is this game? So like so when I realized that these companies like gave up a promo somehow that like it's free data. So I was like, oh, so that's why they're playing it. So it's the only free. So it's not like an app. Like even if you download the app, sometimes like you still have to spend on data. But it makes it easier because they offer this like suggestion. So now like I saw some rise in esports in like in Asia. So it was like, oh, I see. So I think that's the interplay that like sometimes we're also dealing with, like, but even gaming, like how do you decolonize gaming? And like even like the sexism is they're still on sexism. I think somehow. So the, yeah, that everything is ongoing at the same time, and I think it's good for us to, I guess, at least make mistakes together in a forgiving environment rather than be like police
paralyzed or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, and I think in the end.
No, you go. We keep on. You go ahead.
And I think in the end, yeah, it's way better to still create something, like you said. I've gotten like a forgiving environment, making mistakes in a forgiving environment rather than making nothing or being paralyzed or policed or whatever, or being afraid of being policed. And I think like sometimes I experience like frustration with the notion that I feel like nobody understands what, not nobody understands what I do, but a lot of people don't understand what I do. And how I do it, and how it has something to do with photography for me, or it has something to do with that, this and that. And I think it all comes down to like an aesthetic perception of things. And I think usually all people are capable of that. And a lot of times I feel like, but you still, like as a digital artist, you still have to deal with either people who you think, like people that say like I cannot read it, like, you know, I can, like, I don't have the capability or the experience. Maybe I think it's a lot of experience, like what's the right word for it, um like the visionary aspect, like not visionary, like the visual aspect that you're used to, like how you can read a picture, or can you read a photograph, can you read a painting. You can read a painting because you're kind of familiar with how a painting looks like. Can you read like digital art, you know? And I think that's something that a lot of people didn't experience yet, so they cannot really read it. But at the same time, I feel like if you just boil it down to like the aesthetic aspect, like reading something from the aesthetics and in a sense of like sensuality, like feeling whatever you see there, then it should be possible for anyone. And I like, this gives me much more confidence to just also show my work and just say like being confident with what I say and not having the fear to always have to explain it or over contextualize it. Like I'm in a photography class, and I really have to work hard on not feeling to always have to explain what I do, you know? And to me it totally makes sense, because I'm like, all I do is building like a setup, and then like moving the camera from this and that, and then playing with light. So, you know, it would be the same if I would do it in the physical world. I would be in a studio and then build something and put lights anywhere. Like, to me, that's photography, you know, like and then even you have engines that are renderers that like that have an exact representation of the light hitting things, you know, like, but then it's already like, it already makes me mad that I have to think about this, like what does it have to do with photography, because I know I have to explain it at one point, because I'm 100% sure that somebody will ask me that question. And then of course you have people that even when they just hear, oh, you're doing 3D art or you're doing digital art, they already dislike it. And I'm not, I don't think it's so much a question of like being against technology or anything, even though I would totally say that's also part of the art world. I think, like, I sometimes have the feeling that there's this notion around digital art or 3D art that it's kind of dishonest or less real than paintings, or less real than, I'm not sure where this is coming from, but I pledged to myself to not letting this, like all these things that come against you on different levels, like paralyze myself to do something, because in the end it all comes down to like being open to sensually feel a work, or sensually feel like whatever you see, and being open to listen to what I have to say with these tools or something.
Yeah, and when the more that you follow like your intuition, the more that like the world is starting to like keep up because now it's like, oh, now we have a pandemic, and you didn't think you need the digital art, but now all the museums are like scrambling around to like, oh, let's talk about what the politics of like a digital space, and like, mama, we've been new. So it was like it was like the digital artists before are like, I don't know, like now I think people are asking more from us, like how like directions on how to like how to navigate it, because they don't know, which makes us explain more, I think. But at least it doesn't come from like an urgency of like, oh, or like a fear, but now it comes from like a sort of authority that like we know what we're doing. So instead of like explaining it for them to understand, we come from like like the position of like educating them, because this is an alternative to what's not working before. So
I think like also like when we were opening your file, Vanessa, I was like, I definitely felt like that like background in photography, like from your setup with the lights that you had, and like seeing the different like colors you chose and stuff too for your lights. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I would never like personally think of doing that, you know, but like it reflects like the background you have, and like the work you do, like as in like the physical world, and like it all like goes together as part of one practice. So yeah, like I mean that sucks to hear people are like discrediting your digital work, you know, but it all goes together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to say one thing. Like I felt so connected to you too when I sent you my Blender file because I never did that before. I feel like it feels like I'm sending you nudes, you know. Like there's
Yeah.
this special thing now because I sent you my blend file.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I don't know if she'll want to send me like her
Yeah,
Blender file.
Yeah,
I was like,
and I felt like
maybe the
I'll give it to
SVX.
you.
I was like, that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We
but like
appreciate it.
what you guys were saying about like what Alfred was saying about your like we have authority now, but also I think it's interesting how digital art has like been so commercialized lately too. Like after the pandemic, it's like, oh my god, like it's not just museums looking at it, it's companies being like, oh, this is a way to make money, like this is how we can like realize these things. And I wonder if that's like kind of contributing to like maybe also like people not seeing it as the same as like painting or sculpture, like because it has that like commercial commercial aspect that's also very accessible too. Like it is accessible to an extent, of course, because it's like you have to have like these programs and like this education and like access to these things, and also like render time and all this stuff. Like you need time to do it as well. But yeah, like there's so much like conversation I think that digital art and like 3D especially has in relation to like this changing world of like capitalism and like commercialization too.
It's true.
Yeah,
Should
now
we
it
talk
becomes
about
like a race, I
NFTs
guess.
or
Yeah, that's true.
It's on that.
NFTs, yeah, especially.
the elephant in the room, maybe?
Yeah. If you
And now
want.
it becomes a race again. It becomes
Mhm.
like, oh, we have like, you know, so these are the things that we deal with when people like get a hold of the tools that we use to like be able to tell our stories. Is to like we're just like starting to like, oh, we kind of claimed some sort of like space because it's a new language, and now it's like being co-opted, which is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so yeah, it's important that we keep working like this, or the way that we feel it's valuable.
I was
think
thinking like
okay.
why do NFTs piss me off so much, you know? Because at the same time, of course, I also want to earn money, you know. I would love to just
Yeah.
like create. I totally thought about creating an alter ego and signing up for one of the platforms and just producing stuff, you know, and selling them, of course. I mean,
It's
what
tempting,
difference does it make to like having a commercial job to pay your rent, you know? I don't think it's such a big difference. I think the one thing that pisses me off is the revolutionary, like the like people are saying it's revolutionary, and that really pisses me off because it's not at all. It's just taking everything, like the worst parts of the art world. It's not even people buying something because they like it. Like I don't believe it, you know. It's just speculation, and it's the worst part. Or I think the one most, like the one biggest part why I would stop making art is just if it's just like a commodity for speculation. Like there's no sense in a visual output if it's just a commodity to speculation. And I think that's just it's so powerful to take something like this, like just shit, and then say it's revolutionary. It's also like a form of digital artists finally being validated or having value, getting value back of their work. Like that's just not the case. Like if we do something like that, then let's say it's just a money job, you know. There's nothing like deeper in it. It's, I think, yeah, we can also like talk about like all the ecological factors and blah blah blah, but just don't call it revolutionary and just don't think it's crazy good or anything. Well, I think that's really pissing me off with this. Yeah.
I think I think yeah, people are just buying because they're like, oh, it's gonna increase in value like
Yeah.
in the future. And that's like what I find funny too, because I think I was actually I had like a sculpture background, and I was kind of like frustrated with it because I was like I just like was like I don't want to make work with these intentions or like in these, like I would argue like fine art is also very commercial in a lot of ways. Like there's a whole market around it too, and like the gallery space and all of that. I was kind of frustrated with that, and so I moved into digital art with this idea that there's a freedom in it, and like I don't have to tie myself to these markets in the same way, and I can just make the work I want to. And but now I'm like it's like coming at from every direction. I'm like, oh my god, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's a different conversation now, and I don't know what my place is in it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so new. And it's like sensational. Like I think everyone's like, oh, it's so like, because it's interesting how like before everyone's like, what's digital art? And then now they're like, oh my God, NFTs. Like I have a lot of friends who aren't like associated to like the creative circle. So like they know what NFTs are. And I'm like, you know what NFTs are?
Oh my God. They know how to buy it before they understood it.
Yeah. So I'm like,
Collectors.
I wondered, like they didn't buy it, like my friends.
Not your friends, but like
Yeah, but I agree. Like it's interesting that they know what they are, but like they don't really know what it is, you know? Like they're like, I know what an NFT is. So I'm like, they don't really know what it means or like what it means in context of like a creator, like a digital creator, also like what does it mean to like invest in it as well. And it's interesting because like digital art is becoming so like accessible in a sense where it's like everyone is getting more familiarized with it. But I guess it's like the same problem with like open source, like this idea of open source. It's like you can't really control like who knows what, and um like what, like just like the internet in general. Yeah, that is so tied with digital art in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice to like it's nice to have this conversation with you because like I think if anything like for things that are I live beside the road, but like if anything, I hope that like more BIPOC identifying people speak about it. I kind of prefer that like to at least contend with those ideas more than if it was just like really privileged 1% people who talk about it. Because I remember like I was talking to one of my friends about NFTs, and then I kind of just brought up like, oh, Azalea Banks was the first like nude. I think it was like a sex. She sold the first sex video, and I think that should be. I think that's a more. My friend actually said that like it's a more interesting conversation than like NFTs being revolutionary, but like a black woman shunned by like the music industry because she was difficult to work with, like trying to get into this industry. And I mean, we don't always have to support Celia Banks and her views, but at the very least, this conversation opens up more complexity rather than just making people bandwagon on things. And I think one of our biggest advocacies of us as artists is to like look harder into things and not like as emotional as effective as it is. We we kind of take time to form meaning around the things that we value, which is like the opposite of like like let's sell a JPEG and like get like thousands of dollars for it. And it is true that like if you ask any artist, like of course they will want money, but like the house of it, that yeah, it is something that we do think about, should and are thinking about.
Yeah, it's very.
And I think also to me, yeah, and I think also to me, like feel like I feel like my time is too valuable to just create something for one person to enjoy. Like it doesn't make, like when I think about something that I create, I would like it to be seen by many people if possible. Because otherwise I don't really get like the I don't really get the purpose of it. It's like how you cannot even if it's just for one person to enjoy and to own, you cannot even try to find a value for it, because it's just too much work for this kind of impact in a way. And I think also, if you look, and I don't want to shame like uh all platforms or all people that are dropping artworks on mining artworks or whatever, but like
Definitely.
the first times when I was because it's also like the artist is on the bottom of all the like all the money that is flowing around. That's totally clear, right? But and I don't shame anyone for doing it, but I think also when you look at the quality of the work, it's super boring. Like what I see, maybe I haven't seen the right things or the right platforms or anything, but when I was looking at it, I saw things like a huge moon with like an astronaut grabbing it or something. It's like, okay, it's just like there's no soul. Like there's no soul in it. And that's something you can also talk about, like in the big art markets with the big shows and a lot of money flowing around, like where's the soul? But that's why I think it's so unattractive to me, because I feel like, no, like I have so much thought in the things that I do, so why should I like put it into like this package, make it a product and then sell it or something like that? Like it doesn't make sense to me. Not in
Yeah,
general.
people have to
Like
work.
yeah.
People have to work really for. I mean, sometimes it's a big like ask, but people do. I feel like people have to somehow earn the way that we make things, so that they could, so that there is like a transaction of appreciation. I think because it's. I mean, it's easy to just like buy, unless you really want to just like sell this like one thing. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know a lot of people who made things, like not personally, but like I feel like what I've seen is people made things as a purpose of selling an NFT. Like they didn't want to sell something that they were like made previously, because like maybe it's because they had that sold, but they're like, I want to make something for an NFT. And so they're like making something to sell. Essentially, they're making something like with the intention of not necessarily like putting their soul into it too.
Or attaching themselves to it, because it's like not going to be yours to possess anymore.
Yeah, it's like someone else's to possess, and who knows what that person will do with it too. So I think, yeah, it's interesting to see like digital artists making something that's like first not even like you said, just like for one person, or like it belongs, like the authority belongs to someone else, but also like they're making solely for the purpose of like selling something too.
I think what I really enjoyed about our show is how much soul it has. Because I was like, when I was going through all the choices and all the stories, it just really tied together, like the choice of like the proposals. And I think one thing that really jumped out at me is that you chose to balance it with like one thing is like on the ground and one thing is like floating and one thing is like, so it kind of, to me, I that's why every time I get the update, I'm just like like really happy about how it came together, because it is a new, it definitely is it feels like a new experience. And we I think, I'm not speaking for Vanessa or like or like Lucia or everyone else, but I did see, I very much felt like the exhibition held space for all of the stories that we had and are able to translate it in not just in a generous way, but also in like a striking way, where even people who don't know those stories got it in like a like that.
Well, thank you.
We're
really glad you guys liked it, and we couldn't have done it without you guys either. So we're like really glad we were able to have this experience together. Yeah.
I could only imagine that it took so much time.
Yeah. We're like, our computers can't handle it. But it worked out. But also I think we were able to like deliver that like soul even more, because we knew like we wanted to like show these narratives as best as we could, I guess, like showcase these narratives, because like they're so intimate. And I don't know, like it was like very passion, like you mentioned, like soul driven also. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are over time again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining our call and also like participating in March Wins. And if you guys ever want to do anything with us as close as at home, just like
Yeah.
definitely feel
Always
free.
feel free to reach out. Like definitely. We're like just glad we were able to like make new friends and stuff and other artists and whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much
Yeah.
again for like setting it all up, and also reaching out to people. Yeah, I think it was a really beautiful experience. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much as well to both of you and to also us collaborators to come together. Because I was very happy about like a ray of light in the things that's happened. It's like when I check like the residency, I feel that I'm not claiming the success of it, but I'm just so happy to be part of that of your initiative.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you guys. We'll reach out soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
rest of
you so
your
much.
days. Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
No,
You
have a good
too.
night. Have a good
Oh
night.
yeah. Good night.
Or I don't know.
It's like super day to me right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good night, Alfred.
You
Yes.
too.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.